I know we've only gotten through the first quarter of the year, but frankly, I've already seen so many quality new films that I thought it would be fun to just do a quick top 5 of the year so far. Just keep in mind that 2 of these films have not had official releases scheduled by their distributors. So while this is my personal top 5, some of these are going to be ones that you really want to keep your eye out for. First off, The Year Between, a feature debut written, directed by, and starring Alex Heller as a young woman who gets kicked out of college for erratic antisocial behavior and is subsequently diagnosed with bipolar disorder. The advertisements for this movie really didn't do it any favors. They made it look like a pretty typical, quirky indie dramedy, and there's certainly a comedic aspect to it, but Heller's vision is a lot more subtly subversive than I think a lot of people are expecting. Even the most optimistic moments of the movie are underscored by a sort of jaded tension. It really takes seriously what it means to live with bipolar disorder and to live with the dysfunctions and the wounds to which it contributes, not only for those suffering with it, but also with their families. This is not Silver Linings Playbook. There's not going to be some fairy tale ending where everything gets wrapped up in a feel-good bow or moral at the end. I think a lot more people will appreciate what Heller accomplishes with this film if they take the time to seek it out. Then there's Palm Trees and Power Lines, yet another feature film debut, this time writer-director Jamie Dack's harrowing drama about a 17-year-old girl who gets swept up in an infatuation with and is progressively groomed by a 33-year-old man. I've seen a lot of people identifying this as a coming-of-age story, which I think gets it completely wrong. The whole point of what Dack maps out in this film is the tension between how the protagonist either feels or is seduced into feeling as if she is very mature for her age. And then the reality that what is happening to her is that she is only being made more dependent, more vulnerable, more infantilized. Part of the brilliance of this film is how that tension is then represented visually. On the one hand, Dack and cinematographer Chenanan Chatrangroj use a lot of close-up handheld camera work in order to ground us in the protagonist's perspective and her misplaced sense of her own maturity. But then they'll progressively use longer, wider, static shots in order to emphasize how much she really is, physically and emotionally, a child. This is not a story of a character's coming of age. This is the story of a character being groomed into an arrested immaturity and submission, which all culminates in an absolutely brutal ending that is among one of the most emotionally arresting things I've seen so far this year. Obviously, this one comes with a heavy trigger warning, but in a year that's proving rather promising for emerging women directors, you really shouldn't neglect this one. Stonewalling, written and directed by Huang Ji and Ryuji Otsuka. This is about an alienated Chinese millennial who's navigating an emotionally unfulfilling relationship and the gig economy only to discover that she's now also pregnant. Rather than get rid of the fetus, she decides to keep it so that she can sell it illicitly on the black adoption market and use the money to pay for her aging parents' debts. It seems like a rather straightforward premise at first, but as we follow this character over the course of a year, Huang and Otsuka's film really goes in a lot of directions that you wouldn't really expect. The film becomes an exploration of various aspects of modern Chinese society, particularly as it concerns the economic and social status of women and the marketization of their reproductive potential. This is not a conventional drama. Virtually the entire thing is done in single, long, static shots, and the story occasionally takes really big leaps forward in time so that you're all the more expected to pick up on things by inference rather than it being explicated to you. So it requires a lot of patience, but I found it to be an exceptionally beautifully crafted work, and if you like your movies to be really understated and observational, then this is one to put near the top of your must-see lists. Earth Mama, written and directed by Savannah Leaf, starring first-time actor Nia Tamor, about a pregnant woman struggling to get by in the Bay Area, attempting to regain custody of her 2 children from CPS, and considering whether to give up her forthcoming child for adoption. As someone who hasn't been terribly impressed by Leaf's body of short and music video work leading up to this feature debut, I have to say that I was tremendously impressed not only by the beauty of its cinematography and production, which is a talent Leaf always had, but more so by its thematic sophistication and maturity. In a year that's also seen the release of A.V. Rockwell's 1001 and Ryan Lason's All the World is Sleeping, it seems that there's this very pronounced interest in interrogating the extent to which that the institutions that are ostensibly there to protect children from unstable and unsafe home environments also, in actuality, frequently just serve to accentuate the structural inequality that sees women of color in particular being punished disproportionately when they make mistakes, rather than providing the holistic stability at a social level that cultivates their ability to create stable homes and families in the first place. As of yet, A24 has not officially scheduled a release for the film, and hopefully it's not just because they're trying to avoid competition with and comparison to 1001. It would really be a shame if this just got swept off as not being one of their major marquee features for this year, as this is definitely one I think everyone needs to check out. Finally, Daniel Ontaby's God's Time, an odyssey through the streets of New York as a pair of recovering drug addicts attempt to prevent a friend of theirs that they're both in love with from potentially murdering her ex-boyfriend. Talk about stuff that got completely swept under the rug and went straight to VOD this year, but folks, I loved this movie. It's fun, it's funny, it's dark, it's manic and spontaneous. It's definitely a little cringy at times, but I think the thing about God's Time is that it's kind of like that platonic ideal of an indie movie where even its rough edges become a part of its sense of charm and authenticity. So many aspects of its production are so well done, from the cinematography to the performances to the score. It is one of my profoundest disappointments that more people aren't talking about this one, so hopefully in whatever small way this will help to change that. Say it with me now. God's Time, God's Time, God's Time.